Today is Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. A progressive podcaster reveals how they really view Christians. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us your thoughts as well. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me today to get through the news of the day, as we do each and every weekday here, bright and early, CBN's Billy Hallowell, Tragon's Phillips. A lot to get to, as always. On the focus story, a Holocaust Museum puts Tim Walz in his place for what they're calling an offensive comparison. We've got the details on that coming up here in just a moment. Also, on the main thing, a progressive podcaster goes after Evangelical Christians. The backlash is building. Some of the comments she made are pretty shocking. Believers are not staying silent. Billy and Raj will break it all down coming up on the main thing. And with that, we are going to go to the news in 90 seconds. A Florida church says it's being shut down by the courts, not for safety, but for worship. Coastal Family Church in Flagler Beach is appealing a judge's order that temporarily bans it from holding in-person services at its own location. The church's pastor, Roderick Palmer, filed an emergency appeal with Florida's 5th District Court of Appeal with help from Liberty Counsel. The dispute stems from a property association claiming the church violates a strip mall covenant banning public assembly, even though the city approved the church's zoning and there's been no parking problem with more than 160 open spaces during services. The church argues the rules are being selectively enforced. And new details are emerging about a deadly confrontation with federal ICE agents. And officials say it wasn't the first warning sign. CNN's reporting that Alex Preddy, the man shot and killed on Saturday, had a prior run-in with authorities just days earlier. According to the sources cited in the report, the 37-year-old allegedly tracked immigration and customs enforcement officers during an enforcement operation about a week before his death, yelling, blowing a whistle, and interfering with agents. The earlier encounter reportedly ended with Preddy being tackled by several officers, one pressing on his back, resulting in a broken rib. He was released at the scene and later sought medical treatment. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out that story and more over at cbnnews.com. And guys, it just seems like the more we learn about what's going on here, the more this just looks completely, as we talked about earlier in the week, organized, coordinated, and not grassroots at all, according to some, but even some officials that have connections to the Walz administration and the Walz campaign when he was running with Kamala Harris. All those sorts of ties coming together, and it starting to look like perhaps a lot of these efforts here are just being ginned up by activists.
Yeah, I mean, you have to just wonder, and even if some of it ends up starting authentically, you have political operatives that are trying to score points, and you have people who are trying to change rules and regulations and laws, and you have others who want to see America through a different light. Why would they not seize on this opportunity to make chaos happen or further chaos happen to achieve those ends? And so we have to be asking those questions. The assumption that these are all organic protests and that people aren't being bussed in, I'm not saying they are, definitely. I'm just saying my first thought is, where are these people coming from and why are they there?
Well, I think we even sort of saw the mayor of Indianapolis, Frey, kind of tipping his hand, right, and kind of acknowledging it with the statement that he released over the weekend when he essentially disclosed that he's holding the people of Minneapolis, the victims of a lot of this violence, completely hostage. He's like, well, the violence isn't going to stop, Donald Trump, until you pull your people out. It's like, well, you could also get control of your city and then, you know, figure out the politics from there. So I'm not saying that it's an issue to disagree politically. Federal and state officials often disagree, but I think he just tipped his hand in showing, you know what, I could do something about the violence, but I'm not going to until you do something about this Donald Trump. So that way, in his mind, he gets a political victory. I can blame all of this violence, no matter how deadly it gets, on the White House.
Well, we all definitely need to be praying for the situation in Minnesota, across the country, for cooler heads to prevail and for law and order to be restored. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. And Governor Tim Walz, as we mentioned earlier, facing some serious backlash for some comments he made. So, Trey, why is Governor Walz facing this backlash?
Yeah, so the Minnesota Governor, Tim Walz, obviously is, as we mentioned a moment ago, the Democratic Party's 2024 nominee for vice president, is facing some intense criticism after comparing Anne Frank, who hid from Nazis before ultimately dying at just 15 years old in a concentration camp, to the plight of illegal immigrants in the United States. And the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., they didn't explicitly name Tim Walz, but right after these comments from the governor, they condemned such comparisons as, quote, never acceptable and deeply offensive. The museum posted on X, Anne Frank was targeted and murdered solely because she was Jewish. Leaders making false equivalencies to her experience for political purposes is never acceptable, the museum went on to say. Despite tensions in Minneapolis, exploiting the Holocaust is, as I said, deeply offensive, especially as anti-Semitism surges.
And what did Walz specifically say to draw the comparison?
Yeah, so Walz made the statement during a press conference, as you said, following the fatal shooting of 37-year-old Alex Preddy by a Border Patrol agent. And of course, the details of that are still being ironed out. But Walz claimed that children in Minneapolis were, quote, hiding in their houses because of President Donald Trump's immigration enforcement actions. He said, "We have got children hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota." Of course, his comments drew widespread criticism from just about every corner of the internet for equating the experiences of children in Minneapolis and, of course, illegal immigrants in Minneapolis to the, of course, horrific persecution and ultimate murder of Anne Frank, like I said, at just 15 years old in a concentration camp at 1945. And the White House also responded immediately after Walz made those comments and called the governor, quote, a truly disturbed and unstable individual.
How did Walz respond after the statements and the controversy that's brewing up? What did he say?
So despite the intense backlash, it doesn't appear that Walz has directly responded to the backlash, but he did seem to at least partially backtrack on his condemnation and repudiation of the Trump White House, because he agreed to get on the phone with the president. And according to the White House, that conversation went well. He said that Walz expressed a desire to work together on addressing the situation in Minneapolis and, of course, in Minnesota as a whole. Trump said, Governor Tim Walz called me with the request to work together with respect to Minnesota. It was a very good call, and we actually seemed to be on a similar wavelength. And Trump added that he would have his border czar, Tom Homan, coordinate with the governor, and said Walz was, quote, very respectful and understood that plan, with further discussions expected to come in the near future.
Yeah, this is part of what we've been talking about with the rhetoric, the irresponsible rhetoric that we're seeing from leaders in Minnesota, that when they should be pushing people to de-escalate the situation, warning people, hey, do not engage, do not interfere with officers. It seems like they're doing the exact opposite and encouraging them to not only go out there and protest, but to get in the way and saying, get ICE out of our city, like these sorts of things. That seems to be only encouraging these sorts of interactions. And their words, they're stirring up, they're inciting people. This is very reminiscent of the similar arguments that people have made during January 6th that were way less founded because they were taking some things Trump said and kind of stringing them together to try to give that impression when the protest kind of happened all on its own. Whereas this time around, it seems like it's very intentional.
I have so many things to say about this. I just think at the end of the day, when you're looking at a situation like this, let me say the right things, and you're watching the way that people are behaving, every word that comes out of your mouth when you're a leader, it doesn't matter whether you're the president, whether you're a governor, whether you're a mayor, should be words that are going to tone down the temperature and help, or words that are at least stable and sane. And when you see, I mean, going back to his example, using the Holocaust comparisons never go well. I don't know why everybody is obsessed with using them. It never goes well. But I think it's also detached from reality in so many ways. And again, the goal should be, let's bring people together to solve the crisis, not let's make the crisis worse so that we can score political points for our party. You know, I think what has happened is our politicians have actually moved away from we're here for America, and they're like, hey, we're here for our political party or our movement or our ideology. And that's when you end up making these kinds of insane statements, when you've just crossed every border of insanity into the upside down.
Final thoughts, Trey?
Well, I want to be optimistic, and of course, I hope that these conversations between the White House and the Walz administration are successful and lead to some peace. But also, it's been clear from the beginning that Walz is guilty of speaking out of both sides of his mouth. So he says these things about wanting to work together, and that a conversation with the president went well, but at the same time, he's telling people who are out in the streets protesting to continue to go and make good trouble in the streets. So I think that it's kind of a wait and see situation. I hope that this leads to some peace. But as Christians, of course, we just need to continue to pray ultimately for peace to prevail.
And that is ultimately what we need to be doing. We need to be praying, as we said earlier, for peace to prevail here in this chaotic situation. Appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. And we're going to go to the main thing now. Jennifer Welch is a co-host of a popular progressive podcast called I've Had It. And she's drawing some criticism after unleashing a string of inflammatory remarks about evangelical Christians. Billy and Raj break down what was said and why it's striking such a nerve. That conversation is today's main thing.
Jennifer Welch, co-host of the progressive podcast I've Had It, had this to say about evangelical Christians. Take a look.
This is a cancer. White evangelical Christianity is a cancer. These are the worst of our country. These are the worst people in our country because they use their religion in two ways, as a weapon and as a shield. They weaponize it whenever they want to and say, we're on the moral high ground. You're a lesbian. You deserve to die. You're a lesbian. The cops shouldn't have revived you. Oh, your parents are Mexicans and they brought you over here. Yeah, you should go to jail and eat worm food. And then when you call them out on it, oh my God, they're after the Christians. How dare they? How dare they? We're so oppressed. White Christians are so oppressed in this country. And they want it both ways because in the religion, that duplicity is taught. You can be morally duplicitous. You thrive in cognitive dissonance. And so this is just a massive, massive problem. And it should come as no surprise to anyone that of this cult that I'm talking about, white evangelicals, I think over 80% went and voted triple trumped.
Wow. Well, I'm joined by CBN's Billy Hallowell. Billy, what did you think of her comments?
Where to start, Raj? Where to start? You know, it's interesting because oftentimes you will have people on the secular side, and I don't know what's in her heart. I don't know much about her or what she believes. She came out of nowhere the last couple months, I feel like. I know she was a reality TV star before and has this podcast. But the point is, they will start to say things about what Christians should believe, who Christians are, who Jesus really is. And when I start to hear that from people who might not identify as evangelicals, suddenly identifying what they believe evangelicals to be, you can start to sort of poke holes in this very easily because they set up straw men. For instance, this idea that evangelicals are out there saying, you're a lesbian, you deserve to die. I've been an evangelical for a very long time, and anybody who's out there saying you're this or that and you deserve to die is violating what Scripture tells us to do. Anybody who knows anything about Jesus knows that he says to love your enemies. And I'm not particularly calling anybody an enemy. I'm saying the point is, even people you really don't like who are horrible to you and mean to you and terrible to you, you're supposed to feed them, clothe them, love them, pray for them. Let's start there. It's a straw man. This is made up. These are things that are being said that are not accurate. They're not true. No evangelical, no quote unquote white evangelical, because that was a descriptor that was used in this video, is out there saying these things if they're truly an evangelical Christian. Now, the second part of this, let's talk about the fact, and I have a lot to say here, Raj, so you're going to have to bear with me, that evangelicals are among the most generous groups in America. They give 2 to 3 times more to charity than non-religious Americans. 70 to 80% of regular churchgoers donate to charitable causes. Evangelicals are more likely to adopt, to donate, to, I'm sure, shovel other people's driveways in the middle of a winter storm. They are more likely to do all of these things. So calling evangelicals a cancer or saying that they're somehow terrible people does not line up with the data, the statistics, and guess what? The science. We're supposed to follow the science, we've been told. So when you follow the social science, it actually rejects every single thing that was said in this particular video. Just a few more statistics. More than 60% of U.S. food pantries are operated by churches and faith-based groups. Okay, evangelical ministries, they run homeless shelters, addiction recovery programs, job training, emergency housing. I could go on and on and on. I would say that without evangelical Christians, charity would basically be cut in half, if not more so in this country. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to let you weigh in, Raj, because I've gone on for about 2 minutes here. This is not true. It's a straw man, and it's very unfortunate. And one more thing. If you're going to say, oh, they want to be victims, well, when you come out attacking people with straw men and fake information, do you expect people not to respond to that? Now, we can lovingly respond to that, but I just gave you some of the stats that reject 100% what she said there.
Generously, that was an extraordinarily ignorant thing that she said. That was a vile, destructive thing that she said. My dad's from India, and I believe in evangelizing folks for the name of Yeshua. Am I part of this cult? Am I one of these white evangelical people that you're lambasting? Also, can we just stop with the skin color stuff? Like how, like it's come on, let's move on. Like I was just with a group of my buddies this literally 2 days ago at a birthday party, and the person who was the most kind of uncomfortably conservative, Republican sounding talking point guys was the black dude in our group. Like arguing with a bunch of white people. So to say that, oh, well, it's the skin color of this religion. It's like, dude, stop it. Like, stop it. Like, can't we get past skin color? The fact that we're still doing this in 2026 and to say that people want to like, okay, the death of a lesbian. It's like, what are you talking about? I've never met anyone who said anything like that. Now, obviously you can find examples in any group saying some stupid stuff, but to go out of your way to say that we're a cancer, and she's saying like you believe in like deporting Mexicans. I'm like, listen, again, half of my family is from India, all here illegally, by the way. And if you talk to a lot of people in the Indian community, they're not against enforcing immigration laws because they've had to spend sometimes. My cousin, for example, a decade trying to get back into this country legally. So they're kind of feel like a little gyp when people just walk across the border. And so to have this monolithic race-oriented thing, it's like, come on, man. Like, let's judge people by the content of their character, not by their skin color. And again, this whole idea of like, well, it's the Christian evangelical, which is kind of this weird term because like by definition, if you follow Yeshua, his last thing on earth was go and make disciples of all nations, which is to evangelize. So just call them Christians. By the way, Yeshua of Nazareth was and currently is Jewish. At the end of the book in Revelation, it says, look, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And so you're just making fun of like a lot of people and calling them cults and calling them a cancer. You know what? Calling anyone, I mean, even if you're vehemently opposed to their ideology, a cancer is the actual way you do dehumanize people. So again, I don't know Jennifer Welsh, and I'm trying to be generous because, again, as you said, we've been called to love our enemies. And not that she's my enemy. I've never met the lady. But what a ridiculously ignorant thing to say. And the fact that this person has a platform and people listen to that and don't see the hypocrisy in that statement, don't see the double standards in that statement, don't see the vilification of millions of people in that statement while you're taking the high ground. Again, I don't. This isn't a dunk on Jennifer Welsh person. I have no idea what's in her heart. But I will say that, like, that's not just unhelpful, but it's calling anyone a cancer, let alone large swaths of the American population, a cancer. Good gravy. That's just holistically ignorant and unhelpful and dangerous. But also, I have more to say, but I'll give you the last word, Billy.
My last word is this. Again, I want to come back to, first of all, pray for her. and I mean that lovingly, pray for her. And, nobody needs to go attacking her or, with words and fighting with her, attacking her in any way. But I do want to say, I think, again, it's almost like you set up the straw man, you attack the evangelicals, and then you're like, oh, and then they want to be victims. It's like, well, you just victimized an entire group of people and you expect that nobody's going to respond to you. It's almost like it's really the ultimate form of gaslighting. I actually think when you go out there and you attack an entire group of people, is she not doing exactly what she's claiming evangelicals are doing, but she's doing it to a wide swath of individuals? So it's actually silly and unfortunate because so many evangelicals, so many organizations run by Christians doing incredible things. They deserve to be given praise for that, not to be set up on a straw man simply because there's a disagreement over politics or over theology. And so, bottom line, final statement, pray for her and others who think that way.
All right, appreciate that conversation there. And that is going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We got Psalm 86:11. Teach me your way, Lord, that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart that I may fear your name. Just clinging to the truth, no matter how we're feeling about things, and seeking God's way. That is the key to a successful life.
Yeah, in the midst of chaos, no matter where it's happening or what's happening, learning to cling to the promises of God is a good reminder.
Yeah, love that. An undivided mind. That is something all of us need to be praying about, that we can be solely focused on Christ first and not torn to and fro by the wind and the waves of different things of this world. All right, that's where we're going to leave it for this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us. See you back here tomorrow. God bless.